Welcome to MACkite. This is Jeff.
And I'm Tucker.
Hey, and we're here to kind of share with you what we feel are some trends that are kind of moving out as we move into the new year of 2024 in the world of wing foiling.
Yeah, what's happening, how things are changing, and these are some things we think and we're seeing in the industry that are changing.
And I think it comes from our experience of riding all the different gears and seeing some of the new trends that are coming and some of the benefits of that as we learn. What are we, year four or five into wing foiling from its start?
Yeah, a little more than that, I think, actually, depending on when you want to say it started.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think as it's a few more years, we're starting to see some trends that I think are sticking and others that might be kind of trending out. So we'll start with that. I think one that I can start with would be the full sinker board. I know I'm a competitive person, and I knew when I first got into foiling, I started with a big board, and I can equate this maybe to my years of windsurfing too, where you start on your big board and then it's a race to the smallest. Because if you're on a small board, you must be really good.
Yeah,
you're like the local hero.
Smaller's better, right?
You're the best rider. Yeah. That guy, man, he's on that little board. He must be really good. Well, I've done that. I mean, I've ridden all the way down to a 54 liter is the smallest I've got on it, weigh 175 pounds. It is a full sinker. It's under the water. Could I do it? Yes. Did I have fun when I was riding it in powered conditions? Yes. Did I feel it had some benefits in the waves? Yeah, not as much though as my daily driver, a 60 or 70 liter. So I personally feel the sinker boards, the race to small, should be a race at all. I think the sinker boards may have their small niche in areas where it's just raging and super windy.
Yep.
I think in our area where we have such different wind ranges from lighter days, it's kind of limiting.
Yep.
And it can be a lot of work. And I feel once you get a board that's maybe right around that 85 to 90 liter and below, in the same charging conditions, you're not sacrificing much by staying with a little larger board. I think it gives you that ease of mind when you fall off foil in rock and rolling conditions. You can get up easier. And the performance when you're up riding and riding surf, once you get in that smaller range, I think the trade-offs are very small to go to the sinker side.
And I think a lot of what's driving that too is more experienced riders are going to want a narrower board. And they're going to want something that's nimble. So with some of the new designs of boards being a little longer, a little narrower, you can get away with a larger board and still have that feel, but gain all that benefit of a longer board, stability, ease of use, landing jumps, all that stuff. And then the other side of things you're seeing is people that were going to the really small boards a lot of times were into the flippy, spinny, jumpy stuff. And while that works in really, really high winds, the reality is when you're learning new stuff or you're in conditions that aren't blowing 40, riding away on a jump that you go huge on a little tiny board that's going to sink you up to your neck. Number one, even if you do ride away, it's going to look terrible because you're going to sink first, you're going to have to pump your way out of the hole. So even the high-end riders you're finding are riding a little higher volume, even in the freestyle, because it gives them more board to land on. It gives them more forgiveness. That way they can go out there and do, 1080s, they can do backflips 30 feet in the air and still recover when they come down to land. So I think that's the other end of the spectrum too, is that you don't need to go with a 30-liter prone board to have a nimble, fun board.
I would agree. And we're not saying that there's not still made a place in the market for it, and there's you can have one in your quiver, but we're looking more at the general trends for most of the people that are riding in the market, that we feel that's going to be kind of a more of a less trending, smaller side of the market.
Sure. Rather than go with a 40-liter board, you go with a narrower 60-liter board. Yep. And you can ride that in most conditions, and it's going to feel very much the same in terms of performance.
I would agree.
Only with a lot more forgiveness. So.
Another one that we have on here is low or thick foils.
Yeah, low aspect or real thick foils. I think a lot of the market is into winging, or at least influenced by winging. So having more efficient, higher aspect, thinner foil sections is definitely the trend. And then even outside of that, in something like prone foiling, the level has progressed to a point where you don't need these super low aspect, thick, designs that are a narrow speed range, a narrow usage, just to get you on foil. The board designs are getting better, the foil designs are getting better.
Wings
so you can ride faster equipment without much of a detriment to your performance and range.
And that's not to say that each brand will still have their lower aspect, maybe thicker foil for that beginner, of ease of lift and slow speed, but I think there's going to be less focus on it for that reasons, because even the mid aspect, and you get less drag coupled with the right board and and the wing, it's just not as much need for it.
Yeah, and a lot of the designs, rather than being these very low aspect, huge chord, thick foil section, are now moving towards maybe it's a big foil, but it's a little higher aspect. It's a little thinner, because you get a lot of the benefit out of a big foil, out of that low speed lift, but you gain a lot of range and efficiency on the high end as well.
And as you start to do your jives, it gives you more speed for transitioning. So yes, you get really stoked about first riding, but then it's about turning, and you find, I think, you're limited on that. So that is something that we see that might be a little less focus in the foil lineups for the brands.
And also just in general, there's a lot of new riders coming in the market. Since it was a brand new sport, a lot of those riders are progressing, getting into stuff that's a little faster. So naturally, the trend of things just gets faster.
And I think it's good. I mean, when we think of this subject, we're looking at how we morph and how we get better in the industry with our products, so that we just continue to enhance the experience, the ease of accessibility, and that lends well to this next one, the shorter fuselages.
Yeah, it's interesting. Fuselages have gotten crazy short for some people, chasing that maneuverability, that tight turning, that kind of snappability. And I think part of that is coming from where the wings were and how they could turn. If you look back a few years, stabilizers were huge. They're thick. So the only way you can unlock that without going to something smaller, sleeker, better design is to pull that stabilizer closer to the front wing and make it feel looser, and you aren't worried so much about losing the glide in the low end, because those thick front wings don't have much glide to begin with. They always have low end because they're so thick. So that's a different style of riding. There's certainly going to be people that still enjoy that, but for the most part, what we're seeing is trending towards longer fuselages. And when I say longer, I mean kind of standard fuselages.
That middle.
Somewhere in that, 650, 700 range, somewhere in there for most brands, and not going to the super crazy, ultra, mega short,
and that's
300 centimeters
fuselages
like you've seen in the past.
Yeah, that's been my experience, and I think you hit it really well there. The development of the front wings has made it where that performance in the pivoting and surfiness that you would generally want a smaller fuselage for, you don't need now. So paired with the right front wing, with advancements that are being made, that little more standard length gives you a little bit more stability and ease of use, and still access that performance that you're trying to get.
Better
with
pump,
a shorter
better
fuselage,
glide, better stability.
It's that pitchiness that you get.
You can go with a smaller stabilizer. You can still get that feeling with a smaller stabilizer, and then you're removing drag too. So you get better top speed, better glide. So that's part of it, but also just the evolution of the sport. Rather than these slow, snappy turns that you're doing for high performance because the front wing's limiting your top speed, now you're riding twice as fast, making those drawn out power turns. It's kind of like in surfing, you see the little small wave, in the little wave stuff, but as soon as you get into the big powerful waves, it's power turns, it's drawn lines, and that's really where foiling's at now.
And that's where we've seen a lot of advancements in the front foils.
Yeah.
In that market, so the fuselage isn't making up for that performance enhancement. You can go a little longer. Well, I think a good segue would be the huge stabilizer.
We already sort of hit on
talked about that.
Huge stabilizer trending
Less
out for
drag,
sure.
You don't need that,
Even if you have a big stabilizer, they're definitely getting thinner, definitely getting higher aspect. You can still gain that glide, you can still get that low speed lift and pumpability, but you're not adding so much drag to the equation. So that's sort of the plan there.
And as you're in the sport longer, you do notice the drag. It's that subtle difference of that drag that you're trying to not want to experience when you're riding.
Right.
The one pump inflation.
Yeah, so for winging specifically, obviously it's here to stay for kiting. No one wants to pump up 6 struts independently for kiting. But in winging, what we're seeing is independent inflation systems are really becoming the norm. And we've sort of preferred this for a while now. It's nice to be able to inflate those to different pressures. It's nice to have an isolated system for sake of safety and maintenance too. Fewer the hoses, fewer connections, the easier it is to change a bladder or patch a bladder or any kind of issues you might have. Just another fail point. Really, and it just inflates the cost of the wings when you're adding complexity. Inflates the cost of the bladder replacements when you're adding that. So really there's no downside. Connecting a hose in 2 different spots that are 6 inches away from each other really isn't too difficult, especially when you're making that decision and pumping them up to a specific PSI. And then the last thing is you don't have any bleeding between the leading edge and the strut. Really want your strut to be really stiff at all times. If you're connecting it to the leading edge and not clamping that off, you know, all of a sudden your strut will sometimes bleed pressure into the leading edge.
Based on loads.
Yeah, based on how you're loading it up and just what's going on in the wing. So,
And I would think too that the brands are, you know, when they're looking at their R&D, they're kind of, you know, trending the designs and the subtlenesses they're making, you know, with being able to have the separate inflation, you know, you can get those performance enhancements.
yeah, you can start to choose materials based on specific pressures and specific loads for that one piece. Now you're just talking about the struts isolated. You're not talking about the entire frame and how it works in conjunction with one another, where it's, okay, yeah, you know, with this material and this kind of a layup, we can make the strut go to 10 PSI, but we'd really like to keep the leading edge a little lighter and a little bit more flexible, and we'd really only like that to go to 7 PSI. It really changes how you can design the wing, what type of materials you can use, and what
Shape,
sort of
materials.
what sort of construction you can put on something.
Well, this next one could be a little controversial.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit, depends on where you ride, but I agree 100% with it. Big windows on your wing. You know, my experience, and you know, a little fresher in my learning. I'm about 2 years now into winging, maybe 2.5. But first of all, the big windows, I never really looked through them when I was learning. There was so many other things I was focused on. Right. Windows were the last of my priority. And then once I did get more comfortable winging, looking through a window, depending on where the placement was, even if it was a big one, I just found it was really easy just to lift it up. And you know, to maneuver my wing to look to where I was. Right. So I don't think I really used a window a lot. Now that I've been into winging longer, I see, you know, some of the negatives of a window can have, meaning the added weight, the material itself, coming from long years of windsurfing with the clear, you know, folding. I know, you know, we've come a long way with that, where you can, you know, crease them and foil them, and for the most part, there's not issues with them. But I just, you know, don't think the windows really enhance the whole riding experience. It's like you really don't need them.
Yeah, since the beginning, we've had this debate, right?
Yeah.
Should there be windows? I don't think it's necessary. I think, you know, if I was building a custom wing for me, it would never have windows. I could see situations where you would want windows, racing, you know, really crowded areas. Some people just feel more comfortable with that. What I would say is never use it as a crutch, never trust it. You always still want to look around you outside of the window, because they're kind of like wearing blinders. But what I would also say is, you know, really the point here is we're not saying windows are going away. No. I don't think that's the case, but windows are getting slimmer. They're getting placed in better locations where they're useful for when you actually want to use them. And there are times where I like a window. You know, certain backwinding, looking at a wave face and things like that. There's times where you can find it useful. I still wouldn't put one on a wing specifically for me, but you know, there's times where it's somewhat useful, and some people find that more beneficial than others. So,
you know, when I was out at Hood River for the ADFSI, and there was a lot of activity out there, and you know, I do see it. You know, your point there, not necessarily big windows, but a smaller. You know, the placements have gotten better where you just do a quick view. But I like what you said, blinders, and don't rely on it. You know, still do the pickup.
The window's never going to show you what you need to see.
Be aware of your surroundings. Right. Soft handles.
Yeah, I'd say they're trending away. Most brands going to hard handles, or at least having an option for hard handles. And that seems to be what people are asking for nowadays. You don't get too many calls where people say, I specifically want soft handles.
I agree 100%. And I think, obviously from the engagement of learning the sport, I think it'd be hard to argue against it, that hard handles are far easier for people to initiate the power of the wing and just ride, you know, getting all the performance out of the wing they need with the hard handles. You know, soft handles still may have a place. You know, some people say less fatigue, or maybe the wing, because of its higher winds, it may be a little less fatigue in your hands. You can manipulate, but I think the designs of the wings are such now where the hard handles are definitely a good pairing. Yeah,
they definitely figured it out. I think it opens up the adaptability of the wing to multiple riders. You know, when you put soft handles on, there's a specific kind of bridle point where you want to hang on to those. And if you're not the average rider they thought of in designing that in that specific wind, it's going to be a little off. So you're either going to have more pressure in your backhand, you're going to have to hold. You really death grip the thing in a certain way to hold it where you want it. So, you know, for the most part, I'm not upset at soft handles. I like a lot of wings that have soft handles.
Strike's one of my favorite. I mean, I spent
the Ocean Rodeo.
Ocean Rodeo. I've spent all fall on the Strike V3 soft handle, and it's in but I like it in the size 3, 5, or 4. Soft handles don't typically bug me as much down there. It's just nuking.
Right.
You put that thing where you need to go and you're just moving.
Right.
So I have a lot of experience with soft handles, but I would agree that, I mean, it's going to be a smaller niche.
Yeah.
For
most wings, you wouldn't be upset if it had hard handles rather
wouldn't
than
at all.
soft. You'd be like, maybe this is kind of nice, and you don't really know until you try it.
Prefer the hard handles for sure. The other one then would be the standard Dacron and or single strand ripstop.
Yeah, so just the basic kite construction. Every brand is leveling up their construction. Even if it is Dacron, they're going with different grades of Dacron, double layering, certain layouts of staggered grades of Dacron, things like that. Single stop ripstop, or single strand ripstop is pretty much a thing of the past in winging. Nobody's using it. It is double or more, a lot of times even using, materials outside of ripstop now, looking for stiffer, longer lasting canopies because wings do take so much load and people are riding them so much more powered up and aggressively than they had in the past.
Next one on here we had was the square or rectangular panel layouts.
Yeah,
so the wing design.
Yeah, a lot of people going with radial panel layouts, and again, that's just refining how they're building wings because of issues that arise that they've seen in the past, right? Easiest way to make it is with rectangular panel layouts. Everything's square, everything's easy to put together, it's easy to R&D. But with radial layouts, you can really plan and map out how those loads are distributed through the wing and reinforce it in the areas you want. And that just means a longer lasting, higher performance wing with a lighter weight because you can use different materials that are laid out in a certain way.
And we're seeing that trend.
Big time.
The new
Almost
designs.
every new brand is
coming
moving
out
to
with
some variation of that,
Yeah.
and are paying a lot of attention to how the load paths move outside of the frame through the canopy.
Yeah, not only when you're loaded up holding onto it, when it's flagged out, just how it performs.
Yeah.
With that different materials. Hey, one that's not on here that it kind of keeps coming back in my mind. So I'm gonna throw you off maybe a little bit here.
You're good.
Boom. I personally, I windsurfed for years. When I first started getting into sport, I thought a boom was like where I want to be. I'm not a big fan of the boom, but let's take my opinion away. But from a riding experience, the new handles now are starting to trend where they're actually expanding quite a bit of the strut. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So there's not much added room for a boom. Now, one thing I could say, I think why booms are not going to be as popular moving forward and less people are using them. From a beginner standpoint, I think booms are harder, personally, because you just don't know where to put your hands to get the performance of the wing. When you have two solid handles, it kind of limits your range and where you need to be, where the sweet spot for the wing is. I mean, that's how it was made and engineered. When you just have this single color, huge boom, I remember as a beginner just having a struggle sometimes knowing where do I put my hands to access the full potential of this wing.
That makes sense, yeah.
I mean, obviously, as you ride it more, you kind of figured it out. But I think that's one of the reasons why I think we're going to see less of the booms. The other one, I think the added weight, and I think the two-handle, rigid handle development has come along such that there's really no need for that long boom.
I'm going to disagree with you on this point, Jeff.
Oh, I love it.
Here we go.
That's why I threw it in there,
Yeah,
dog.
buddy.
I like this.
It's not that I ride boom wings all the
say.
time. I don't even necessarily prefer them myself. I really love them free riding.
And what
Sometimes
wing now? Strike? I mean, slick?
Slick, yep. Ocean Rodeo boom is a good one. There will be some more boom options coming into the market from brands this year, I will say. I can't specifically name which, but there will be more boom options in the market this year for sure. So it'll be more than just the slick from Duotone that has a boom this year. So there's a certain amount of people that really love the boom. And I think a lot of that comes from, it can be from the windsurfing end. It can also just be from the one-handed wing flying. So that's why we see Duotone on the unit for 2024 extending the front wing handle.
So you could just hold
So it's
it.
almost like a half boom.
that's what I'm
And
trying to
the
say.
rear hand is smaller, but it's there so you can one-hand the wing in the surf essentially. There's really no other reason to have it there. The other thing I would say is a new rider progressing, so maybe not the first time you hand down to the handles, but when you're learning your first transitions, when you're learning your first wing handling moves, just maneuvering your hands in different ways, the boom is impossible to miss. There's no middle section to miss the grab. They tend to stand off the wing a little bit more. So if you swing your hand in the general vicinity of where that thing is, you're gonna find it, even if it's dead center. And then you can always adjust where you want to be.
Convincing.
Yeah, the biggest
not for
reason
me,
I would
though.
say against booms though is just the portability of them. You know, it's a 3.5 foot long pole. And other than that, you know, the wing packs into a relatively small backpack. So traveling with it, carrying it in vehicles, you know, things like that can be a little bit more cumbersome. So I think, you know, if they can solve that problem with a 2-piece or something, or even just something like a long front handle like Duotone's doing, that's a really good compromise for those people that do still want that boom.
Sure. Well, I guess time will tell.
But there's no real specific reason to have a boom outside of being able to one-hand the wing. So freestyle, there are some guys doing freestyle moves that you need to be able to one-hand the wing. And also just riding in surf, you know, sometimes being able to one-hand that in the middle with some power is really fun. It opens up a world that you normally don't have access to.
Yeah.
So
Looks like it came full circle. I mean, you see it still in the market, but maybe not as broad, which is kind of where I was coming from. I just don't see it as being as prevalent.
yeah, I don't think it's going to be the answer for everyone in the future. I don't think every wing's going to have a boom in the future. In fact, I probably think that most won't.
No, I think a smaller percentage of people are
But
riding
it'll
those.
always be there, I think. There's a certain amount of people that love the boom. And I think it does have a tangible benefit that won't go away.
Yeah. Time will tell. See how that trends as we go. So I just want to throw that in there to see.
Yeah, no, that's a good one to discuss.
Yeah,
'cause
yeah. The
it's-
boom. I don't sell a lot of boom wings to customers other than the Duotone Slick. And you know, we do have the Javelin.
One has a following.
And not quite, yeah. Maybe my reasons are right, maybe they're not. Well, time will tell. We'll see. Anyways, moving right along, the soft, flexible wings.
Yeah, and that kind of goes along with the standard Dacron and ripstop, I guess.
Yeah.
But in the past, wings actually were built to flex a little bit. I'm seeing most brands trending away from that because they don't want to put that kind of load, unpredictable load on the wing. But also because most people are riding the wings more powered up now, they don't want that spongy feeling. They want a direct, efficient, you know, layout, and it's really hard to design a wing when you don't know how much it's going to flex because you don't know what wind it's going to be in, you don't know the rider riding it or how they're going to push it. So you do still see
Totally
some
agree with
softer,
you.
flexible wings in the more affordable beginner categories, which is fine. But I would say the predominant amount of designs and R&D going forward is towards something stiffer and more rigid.
And if we can do that, where when you flag the wing out, it stays somewhat stable. We can find that sweet spot with design. I think we got a win-win.
Yeah, the PPC M1 is extremely stiff. It's probably the stiffest wing in the market right now.
Yep.
Flags out great. Ocean Rail Glide in both the A series and the AA series, both are very stiff. Both flag out phenomenally.
I agree 100%.
So I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. I think you can definitely do both.
Whereas
just
in
depending
early
on what you do
stages,
with the
that was
design.
kind of maybe the trade-off a little bit.
Yeah.
That, another reason, the scoop, the way you pump to get up, sometimes you can get that whip effect at the low end to get that extra. But I think some of the focus in the design is going elsewhere to get the same effect without having to have that looseness. So,
Yeah, you can build in that grunt, you can build in that
Yeah.
power if that's what you want without having a lot of flex. And case in point is our award winner, Loft Pro.
Loft Pro,
That thing's stiff as a board, but has tons of low end power.
tons of low end.
Pumps
Good.
like a beast.
It does, pumps like a beast for sure. How about for toe ends and downwind struggles? All right. That's an interesting lead in. So what was trending out is toe ends behind a boat or a jet ski, generally a jet ski.
Right.
Or the downwind struggle, obviously. Trying to get, the downwind's a big trend, and a lot of people, unless they live in the right spot,
Yeah, or have the
downwind
right
is not
prerequisite skill. It's
you got to
hard.
be really skilled in shape. I mean, I'm being serious here. So you
Have the right
be,
conditions, the right
Yes.
gear. There's a
Athleticism.
lot of variables there that have to be
Yes.
right for it to work.
Yeah. So you see that struggle, that side going out, what trending?
The foil drives, man. Foil drives taking over the world.
They are.
Everybody that foils wants a foil drive, and there's a reason for it. And because people can go out and tow themselves into waves, we can go ride together, and we can go ride waves together without you having to drive the ski, switch out, me riding the ski. That means you get twice as much ride time. And downwind struggles, there are so many people that love the idea of downwinding. It's such a fascinating, amazing sport. It is so cool to be able to just cruise on wave power with no wind affecting you, just gliding, chilling. There's so much adventure involved in that. But, a lot of people don't have that skill. They haven't built that technique. They don't have, the super high-end, top of the line latest, greatest gear, or maybe they don't have the right conditions. But the foil drive lets them get out there and have that same kind of experience or learn as they're having fun without walking miles up the beach or getting stranded in some God knows where.
Yeah, I'd say, speaking from experience, it can increase the learning curve. You don't need to spend as much time on the water because you have that foil drive making up for the lack of skill, power, and ability. There's still time to adjust to the foil drive to figure out, to get you rolling,
but you're having fun.
It does, and it gives you just that access to getting in the right spot over and over again. Far easier.
Yeah, you can try new things. You can take new lines to learn how to read the waves better, rather than just struggling, praying that you're going to stay gliding and on foil. You can try new things, mess up.
Yeah.
It's okay. You're not stressing about it. You're having fun. And you're going to go on days when you normally wouldn't because the foil drive is going to allow you to do that. Whereas normally you'd say, your conditions are kind of iffy, I can't go. Sure. Or maybe my gear's not quite right.
Well, as we wrap up, this last one, I think is one that kind of excites me, believe it or not. Thing that are trending away here is board design. From being a short, chunky board to more not focusing. I guess there's a couple things we could head on as we dive into this. First of all, the shape, short and chunky. When we say short and chunky, meaning something that has higher volume that's not very long.
Yes, short, wide.
Which tends to be a lot of what we've seen as the last 3 or 4 years in designs and what a lot of riders have now and ride. But what we're starting to see, where that focused on volume, we're starting to see more things not focusing so much on volume, but a longer board that is thinner and it disperses the volume. And where volume isn't the number one factor for performance, it's more that length and the thickness. And I attest to that when I first started riding the F1 S-Wing foil board. That has that thinner profile, longer, and I was amazed at a couple of the benefits. First of all, it's the versatility. And using it in lighter winds and higher winds, it gets that board speed up faster than a short, chunkier board. Even more important, when it was just raging out there and the way it's wavy and there's so much turbulence on the water, the longer, narrower boards help me to get back up on foil so much faster. What I mean by that is when you have a higher aspect foil and you're charging in waves and you go down and you're trying to get back up, you want to keep that board flat and be able to get that board speed to pop back up again. And what I was finding in my short, chunkier, similar volume boards, that it would want to submarine. It felt so corky. I use the word
put the brakes on even if you don't submarine.
Yeah, I even use the word corky. It was just like pitch forward, pitch back. I get rolling and I try to get that speed going and I just want to submarine and back. So I see that trend, kind of slowing down where that boxier, thicker to more that elongated, and that's been my experience.
Beginner boards are still going to be that way. They might trend a little bit short, a little bit narrower, a little bit longer, following that more intermediate advanced trend. But as more people get out of the beginner boards into something, they're looking for more progression, but also keeping that ease of use. I think that's the key. We talked about it, how sinker boards are disappearing because the ease of use is so difficult. Well, you have this kind of in-between mode where you pick your board based on your length. That's your ease of use. Your length is your ease of use as long as you're not going off the wall in terms of volume and width.
I would agree.
Your width determines your performance as well as your thickness of the board. Thinner, narrower the board, the higher performance. Even if it's a few inches longer, it's going to be feeling much nicer, feel much more like a prone board rather than a sub.
It'll feel like a smaller board.
Yes, feels like a much smaller board even if it's longer. And the way I choose those usually is picking the length first, and then you can't really pick volume and width independently, but generally you're sizing down on your volume, sizing in on your width, and you're going slightly longer in terms of your length.
I agree with that.
While a board around 75 liters may have been my kind of go-to in the past, now my go-to is like 60 liters, but a couple inches longer. And it's much more of a surfy kind of a shape, and it's just as easy to ride. The lower volume sits lower in the water, gives you a lower center of gravity, gets you below the water's energy level at the surface there where you're getting bounced around so much. So in nasty conditions, it's just easier to ride. And just because of that length, once you have some decent technique, you don't need as much volume under your feet, you don't need as much width to do that once you know what you're doing.
That's where I was at. I was on like a 411 75 liter,
Yeah.
and I went to a 70 liter 5.2. So just that added length, a little narrower, I find a lot more easier to engage in crazier conditions and wave conditions. So, well, there you have it. I think we kind of covered them all.
Yeah.
The trends, there's quite a list there, but
Yeah,
I think that's
went
good.
deep.
It's good to see. I mean, we're learning from, you know, the past, and then we're applying some new designs as we move forward. So we hope this was some helpful and some thoughts, kind of give you some thoughts of what you may be looking for and seeing, and why you're seeing some of the trends that are kind of, I wouldn't say leaving, but are maybe less focused on. And obviously we're trying to head into designs that get us all in the water, easier to engage with, enjoy. So
yeah, have more fun. What it's all about.
Exactly.
So if you have any questions, want some suggestions, reach out to us. That's what we're here for. Happy to point you in the right direction for your situation. Give us a jingle. Thanks for joining us.